Every December, millions of families around the world gather by the fireplace, turn on the TV, and immerse themselves in the black and white reels of It's a Wonderful Life. People revere it as the perfect Christmas miracle, a supreme symbol of humanity and warmth. But if you peel back that fluffy white snow, you'll find a much more brutal truth. What if I told you that behind the on-screen smiles was a director haunted by the smoke of war and a leading man struggling with severe post-traumatic stress disorder? That the tears rolling down a child actor's cheeks were from the genuine agony of a stinging slap? And most bizarrely of all, why was a movie championing human kindness blacklisted by the FBI as a suspected threat to national security? Today, let's walk across the snow-covered bridge of Bedford Falls. We are going to peel back the 20 bizarre, dark, and untold facts about It's a Wonderful Life. Number 1. The bleeding war wounds of the director and leading man. To truly understand the genuine despair of George Bailey, we have to look at the brutal reality of the men who created him. It's a Wonderful Life isn't a happy movie. It is the sobbing cry of men carrying the psychological trauma of World War II. Before the war, Frank Capra was the king of optimistic romantic comedies. But after enlisting and witnessing piles of corpses and bloody documentary footage of concentration camps, Capra's soul was shattered. He returned to Hollywood with a guilty conscience, disgusted by the fake glamour of the major studios. At the same time, Jimmy Stewart had just returned from actively piloting bomber planes and dropping death across Europe. Stewart suffered from severe PTSD, drastic weight loss, chronic insomnia, and seemed to have forgotten how to smile for the cameras. Both men were broken, lost, and questioning the very value of life itself. Capra borrowed money to found Liberty Films, an independent studio created to escape the censorship of capitalist studio moguls. Their debut film was a desperate attempt to heal their own wounds. The scene where George Bailey collapses in a bar, desperately begging God for salvation, wasn't acting. That was Jimmy Stewart dragging the ghosts of war out of his own mind and exposing them to the lens. Number 2. A masterpiece, born from a Christmas card. In 1943, author Philip Van Doren Stern wrote a short story titled The Greatest Gift. He knocked on the doors of countless publishers, but was ruthlessly rejected because the story was deemed too depressing and bizarre. Out of options, Stern self-printed his 21-page story into a DIY Christmas card and mailed it to 200 close friends during the holidays. By a twist of fate, one of those cards found its way to the desk of actor Cary Grant and subsequently caught the eye of executives at RKO Pictures. However, Stern's original story was vastly different. The leading man in the card wasn't named Bailey. His name was George Pratt. There was no town history, no childhood sweetheart, no evil banker, and no elderly angel named Clarence. It was just a quiet, lonely fable on a bridge about a man getting to see what the world would be like if he had never been born. Director Frank Capra took that tiny seed and added flesh, blood, regrets, and a lifetime of silent sacrifices to completely rebuild it from the ground up. They turned a whisper on a postcard into an epic about humanity, proving the immense power of rejected ideas. Number 3. The stinging slap and blood-stained tears. Veteran actor H.B. Warner played the pharmacist Gower, a man drowning in alcohol and frantic agony after receiving a telegram that his son had died in battle. To capture the absolute depths of that breakdown, Warner resorted to an extreme acting method. He drank real alcohol, walking onto the set genuinely drunk, so he wouldn't have to fake the pain. In his intoxicated, uncontrollably immersed state, the slap he delivered to child actor Robert J. Anderson wasn't held back like they had rehearsed. The blow landed so hard it created a dry, echoing smack across the set. Young Anderson later recalled that the force of Warner's swing actually tore the skin inside his ear, drawing blood and sending a shooting pain through his head instantly. The tears rolling down the boy's cheeks were entirely from sheer pain and absolute panic. The second director, Frank Capra, yelled, "Cut!" H.B. Warner seemed to snap out of his drunken stupor. He immediately rushed over, pulled the boy into a tight hug, and sobbed, apologizing profusely for hurting him. Capra decided to keep that exact take. Not because he liked the violence, but because that moment stripped bare the true cost of pain, torment, and forgiveness. Number 4. The breathtaking kiss that made history. The scene where George Bailey and Mary Hatch share the same phone receiver, listening to the voice of their friend Sam Wainwright before exploding into a passionate, intense kiss, is one of the greatest kisses in Hollywood history. Their pent-up tension, heavy breathing, and hesitation felt so authentic it makes viewers blush. Why was it so vivid? The secret lies in a crazy, unprecedented directorial decision by Frank Capra. Normally, per standard script practice, Sam Wainwright's voice from the other end of the line would be pre-recorded and played back on set, or an assistant would read the lines off camera. But Capra felt that doing so would kill the natural rhythm of his two leads. He wanted something trembling, spontaneous, and breathing in real time. So, he set up a live connection system. Jimmy Stewart and Donna Reed stood pressed together on the main set, holding a real, working telephone to their ears. Meanwhile, in a completely different soundstage miles away, actor Frank Albertson, playing Sam Wainwright, was holding a real phone and reading his lines live through a cable connected between the two buildings. Every pause, every breath, every invisible silence was transmitted vividly through that fragile wire. Swept up in the hyper-realistic atmosphere, Jimmy Stewart lost control. He grabbed Donna Reed and crushed his lips against hers in a completely unrehearsed kiss, so forcefully that Capra had to scrap part of the original script. That kiss wasn't an acting technique. It was an emotional electric current that had been suppressed for way too long, bursting out in a breathtaking moment. Number 5. The disaster of artificial snow. Long before CGI ruled Hollywood, making it snow on film was an absolute audio disaster. Studios typically used cornflakes painted white to simulate snow. The problem was, when actors walked on those cornflakes, it created a loud, crunching noise that drowned out all the dialogue. Previous films had to shoot the footage first, then drag the actors into a recording booth to dub their lines from start to finish. But Frank Capra utterly despised dubbing. He wanted to capture the live, desperate whispers and choking breaths of George Bailey right there on the snow-covered bridge. To make that happen, RKO's special effects team, led by Russell Shearman, had to execute a chemical revolution. They invented a brand new type of chemical snow by mixing foamite, a fire extinguisher chemical, with soap and water. This mixture was pumped through giant wind machines, creating fluffy, weightless, and most importantly, completely silent snowflakes. Over 6,000 gallons of this miraculous mixture were sprayed across the massive Bedford Falls set. Thanks to it, Jimmy Stewart was free to whisper his broken prayers amidst the dead silence of winter without any background noise ruining the take. This breakthrough invention shocked the Academy, earning the RKO team a prestigious Sci-Tech Academy Award. Number 6. The massive town built on wood and faith. RKO Studios granted Capra a massive 4-acre plot of land in the San Fernando Valley. For 2 grueling months, hundreds of workers erected a colossal town featuring 75 complete buildings, a 3-block-long main street, and a fully functioning factory district that pumped out real smoke. The peak of their obsessive detailing was uprooting 20 massive, fully grown oak trees from elsewhere and transplanting them directly onto the set to create the illusion that decades had passed. Capra even released dozens of dogs and cats and trained flocks of pigeons to fly freely to breathe life into the alleyways. Bedford Falls was so authentic and vibrant that it ceased being a construction project and became a living memory. The resemblance was so profound that the real town of Seneca Falls, New York, later officially declared themselves the original inspiration for Bedford Falls. To this day, Seneca Falls hosts annual festivals, recreating scenes from the film as if George Bailey were still casually strolling past their old building and loan. A fictional world built of plywood in Hollywood somehow permanently materialized into a real landmark in the heart of America. Number 7. The Christmas Miracle and the National Security Threat Verdict. America in 1947 was a country besieged by Cold War paranoia and the anti-communist movement. In that frenzy, even a heartwarming Christmas movie could become a hunted target of the FBI. Just months after the film's release, a top-secret FBI intelligence report was submitted to Director J. Edgar Hoover. This report issued a severe warning that It's a Wonderful Life contained subliminal communist propaganda aimed at sabotaging America's capitalist system. Their evidence? The character of Mr. Potter, the wheelchair-bound, cold-blooded, greedy, and ruthless banker. The FBI argued that turning a banker into the ultimate villain while glorifying the poor working-class borrowers was a classic smear tactic designed to incite class warfare. They turned a blind eye to the entire message of sacrifice, generosity, and faith in God delivered by the angel Clarence. They only stared at Mr. Potter's moneybags and hastily condemned the film as a national security threat. Thankfully, this paranoid investigation eventually sank due to a lack of actual evidence. But that FBI memo remains in the archives to this day, serving as the most ridiculous and ironic proof that, in times when society is consumed by fear, even a winged angel can be branded a subversive spy. Number 8. The screenwriting duo who quit over a feud. Frank Capra hired Francis Goodrich and Albert Hackett, a husband and wife screenwriting duo famous for their elegant prose and sharp structure, to mold the script. But they didn't anticipate the dictatorial, patronizing nature of this director. Script meetings frequently devolved into battlegrounds. Francis was especially sickened by Capra's condescending habit of always addressing her as "my dear woman," a phrase dripping with the era's disregard for female competence. The tension peaked when the new script was only halfway done. Capra, instead of speaking to them directly, had his agent call to rush them and demand to know when the script would be finished. Her pride deeply insulted, Frances didn't hesitate. She clapped back fiercely. "We are finished right now!" She threw her pencil on the desk, grabbed her husband Albert's hand, walked straight out of the office, and slammed the door. They never returned to the project, leaving Capra to clumsily patch up the rest of the script himself. An ironic truth. The movie that glorifies the warmest neighborhood camaraderie in history was forged in the fires of toxic conflicts and towering egos. Number 9. The composer's deep-seated grudge. Legendary composer Dmitri Tiomkin was entrusted by director Frank Capra with the ultimate task, creating the emotional heartbeat for George Bailey's Resurrection. Tiomkin locked himself in the studio, pouring his entire heart and mind into composing an epic symphony, expecting it to guide the film from the depths of despair to the absolute peak of euphoria. But in the darkness of the editing room, a fatal knife was swung. Director Capra, in his stubbornness, suddenly felt Tiomkin's score was too loud and was overpowering the actor's emotions. Without a single word of consultation, Capra took the scissors and butchered the original symphony. He stripped out the climaxes, secretly swapping out numerous segments with cheap, generic stock music from the RKO library. The ultimate insult came in the final scene. Capra threw out Tiomkin's grand finale epic and replaced it with recycled music from The Hunchback of Notre Dame. Dmitri Tiomkin was completely blind to this coup. He dressed to the nines and attended the premiere, bursting with absolute pride. And then, when those patched-up alien melodies blared from the screen, the composer's heart was ripped to shreds. The pride of a great artist was ruthlessly trampled. From that day forward, Tiomkin cut Capra out of his life forever. For the rest of his days, he scornfully referred to It's a Wonderful Life as a cheap, trashy hack job. Capra's patched-up version certainly succeeded, but the complete soul of the original symphony was forever lost in Hollywood's ruthless current. Number 10. Jimmy Stewart's fateful signature. Before Frank Capra bought the rights to this project to launch his independent studio, it was owned by RKO, and RKO had tailored this script with one sole purpose: to make it a stage to showcase the slick, glamorous charm of superstar Cary Grant. The original plot was riddled with flashy romance and lacked any psychological depth. The name of actor Henry Fonda was also tossed around to create a noble hero. But Capra tore up that blueprint. When he read the script, he didn't see a gentleman in a tailored suit. He envisioned a man beaten down and eroded by life, someone filled with anxiety, cynicism, and clumsiness, yet possessing a pure heart. Capra knew that in this world, only one man possessed that fractured halo: Jimmy Stewart. Capra invited Stewart to his office and pitched the story about a suicidal man meeting a wingless angel named Clarence. Stewart, at the time, was extremely insecure about his acting abilities post-war. He cut Capra off mid-sentence, not even bothering to hear the rest of the plot, and said, "Frank, if you want me, I'll do it." He signed the contract purely out of a survival instinct and absolute trust in his old friend. That fateful choice reshaped cinematic history. Jimmy Stewart injected the fragility, the desperate blinks, and the choking voice of a deeply scarred soldier straight into the character of George Bailey. Cary Grant could have made the character charming, but only Jimmy Stewart could make him a monumentally heartbreaking human being. Number 11. Sweating bullets in the dead of winter. The town of Bedford Falls appears on screen like a perfect, magical snow globe. Everywhere you look, there are massive snowdrifts, frosted windows, and heavy overcoats. Audiences watching the film can practically feel the bone-chilling frost of Christmas Eve. But behind the lens, the truth was scorching hot. This entire winter wonderland was actually filmed during the blistering summer of 1946 in California. The outdoor temperature frequently spiked over 90 degrees Fahrenheit, 32 degrees. And it didn't stop there. Inside the sound stages, hundreds of giant high-voltage lights radiated heat like a crematorium. In the middle of this literal hell, the actors and extras were forced to bundle up in thick wool coats, scarves, and heavy gloves. Sweat poured down like a shower under their heavy makeup, all while RKO's chemical snow drifted down around them. Number 12. The unscripted kiss and the spectacular fall. Frank Capra's genius lay in how he always knew how to exploit chaos to wring raw authenticity out of his actors. The bank run scene is a classic example. According to the original script, the situation was fairly simple. The timid Mrs. Davis steps up to the counter and asks George Bailey to withdraw $17 to survive. But right before yelling, "Action!" Capra secretly pulled actress Ellen Corby aside and whispered a covert order: ask for $17.50. When the cameras rolled, Ellen Corby timidly requested that bizarre number. Hearing a figure so ridiculously petty and pathetic, Jimmy Stewart froze for half a second. Then, he suddenly burst into hysterical laughter. That laugh tearing out of his throat wasn't acting. The overwhelming emotion and relief drove Stewart to lean entirely over the counter and plant a spontaneous, forceful kiss on Mrs. Corby's cheek. Her stunned, bewildered smile in that moment was 100% genuine emotion. And that's not all. The film was blessed with another priceless accident. When Uncle Billy stumbles drunkenly out of frame, a deafening crash rings out, signaling he just smashed into a pile of trash cans. That sound wasn't in the script. It was actually a clumsy prop guy dropping a massive pile of equipment off camera. Instead of yelling cut to do another take, actor Thomas Mitchell thought incredibly fast on his feet and yelled back into the frame, "I'm all right! I'm all right!" Two accidental mishaps, two spontaneous reactions, gave wings to moments that made Bedford Falls feel more alive than any script could ever capture. Number 13. The historic Sesame Street hoax. The cultural impact of It's a Wonderful Life runs so deep in America that it created global Mandela effects, false collective memories. In the film, there are two beloved supporting characters, the kind-hearted cop named Bert and the jolly cab driver named Ernie. This coincidence led generations of viewers, and even the media, to fiercely believe that the legendary children's show Sesame Street borrowed their names for the iconic puppet duo, Bert and Ernie. This rumor spread like wildfire for decades, woven into a beautiful, inspiring piece of trivia. But the truth is always more boring than the rumors. Writer Jerry Jewell, who worked directly with Muppet creator Jim Henson, had to publicly clear the air multiple times. He firmly stated that Jim Henson was never thinking about Bedford Falls when he named them. The two puppets were called Bert and Ernie simply because one had a face that looked like an Ernie and the other had a pointy head that looked like a Bert. That's it. Number 14. The masterpiece of three shattered souls. Frank Capra built countless cinematic empires. Jimmy Stewart possessed a vault of lifetime masterpieces. And Donna Reed defined an entire decade of American television. But if you asked all three of them at the end of their lives what their true crowning achievement was, their answer was always eerily unanimous: It's a Wonderful Life. This obsession didn't stem from glamour or awards. It came from the resonance of souls that had been beaten down by life. For Stewart, the film was a confessional booth. It was the echo of the silent agony he brought back from the battlefield, the journey of a man learning how to not pull the trigger on himself. For Donna Reed, it was the fateful crossroad that pulled her out of the shadow of being a backup and into the light, becoming a true leading lady, wielding the power of healing. And for Capra, this wasn't a commercial project. It was his spiritual last will and testament. Years later, despite being shunned by critics upon release, Capra still held his head high and aggressively declared, "I don't care what anybody says, it's the greatest movie ever made on this planet." Hidden behind every frame are human beings ripping their hearts out to offer their absolute best. That masterpiece didn't just change the audience's perception, it salvaged the very souls of the people who made it. Number 15. The unknown star who became the anchor of the world. When you mention the female lead, Mary Hatch, audiences naturally assume the role was born for Donna Reed. But the truth in Hollywood is always harsher than that. Frank Capra had actually tailor-made this role for superstar Jean Arthur, someone he had incredible chemistry with in his pre-war blockbusters. However, Jean Arthur was stuck doing a play on Broadway at the time. Other massive names like Olivia de Havilland, Martha Scott, and Anne Dvorak were tossed onto the table and then tossed out. And then fate opened the door for a girl with a shy smile from rural Denison, Iowa. Donna Reed at the time was just a fading young actress, typecast in harmless supporting roles. She was not a box office draw. But the moment they met, Capra was floored by an inner halo radiating from her, absolute grounding, simplicity, and pure sincerity. Number 16, the historic nickname born from a cookie box. There are details so absurdly small that they end up making a film great. Little Zuzu Bailey only appears for a flash, but the line, "Every time a bell rings, an angel gets his wings," became immortal. Have you ever wondered why a child would have such a bizarre name as Zuzu? Director Frank Capra didn't pull that name out of some obscure dictionary. He took it straight from a box of cookies. Zuzu Ginger Snaps was an incredibly popular cheap brand of sweet ginger cookies all across America in the early 20th century. When casting child actress Carolyn Grimes, Capra gave her this nickname like a gift wrapped in nostalgia. This subtle setup unleashed massive emotional devastation in the scene where George Bailey returns home, races upstairs in pure desperation, and sobs, "Zuzu, my little ginger snap, how do you feel?" It sounds harmless, but it struck the very core of American parents at the time. A father calling his child by a familiar nickname tied to an everyday snack, rather than delivering a forced, overwritten line. Amidst the illusions of winged angels and an erased reality, the film held tightly to the scent of a warm kitchen, a cookie brand transformed into an eternal Hollywood memory. Number 17. The wave of outrage over a cash grab sequel. In 2013, two unknown producers suddenly held a press conference, casually announcing they were greenlighting a sequel titled "It's a Wonderful Life, the Rest of the Story." The proposed script was incredibly cliché. It followed George Bailey's grandson, who also falls into depression and is visited by an angel to learn the value of life. It sounded nostalgic, but the project completely lacked any involvement from the Capra family, lacked the soul of Jimmy Stewart, and reeked heavily of a greedy cash grab. The moment the news dropped, social media erupted in pure fury. Critics, film historians, and millions of fans drew a hard line in the sand. They were disgusted by the idea of digging up a perfectly wrapped ending. The public backlash was so ferocious that Paramount, who held partial derivative rights to the film, immediately jumped in and delivered a legal smackdown. No sequel was allowed to roll cameras without their explicit permission. And of course, that door was slammed shut forever. The project died just days later. To this day, that idea remains tightly sealed, just like a snow globe that no one dares to shake. Number 18. The miserable flop that destroyed a studio empire. Looking at the film's greatness today, It's hard to believe it was once a horrific box office disaster. On paper, It's a Wonderful Life looked like an unstoppable juggernaut. A renowned director fresh back from the war, the return of America's golden boy leading man, and a Christmas story expected to warm the nation. But when it hit theaters in December 1946, that halo was swiftly and mercilessly snuffed out. The holiday season that year was jam-packed with blockbusters. The little town of Bedford Falls was swallowed whole by the mega hit The Best Years of Our Lives, another colossal film that also tackled the veteran experience. Furthermore, the psychology of the American audience at the time was highly anxious. They paid for movie tickets looking for escapist laughter, not to watch a good man pushed to the brink of jumping off a bridge. Critics tore each other apart. Half praised it, while the other half trashed it as overly sentimental, dark, and rambling. Box office revenues sank like a stone, and the movie lost over $500,000, a staggering fortune at the time. This financial catastrophe dealt a fatal blow to Liberty Films, the indie dream studio Capra had poured his entire fortune into building. Unable to recover from the shock, Liberty Films was sold off and went bankrupt shortly after their next project. The Cruel Irony of Hollywood, a movie about an angel saving a man's life, became the very death sentence that destroyed the careers and dreams of the men who birthed it. Number 19. Frank Capra's life or death gamble. Before Bedford Falls was ever erected, Capra made a blood oath to himself. After witnessing death in the war, he would never let some box office billionaire dictate how he was allowed to dream again. Founding Liberty Films was a desperate bid to seize creative freedom. It's a Wonderful Life was his very first all-in hand. For the first and only time in his career, he funded it out of his own pocket, produced it, co-wrote it, and molded every single frame without suffering the chokehold of any censorship committee. When the movie flopped, Capra lost everything. He lost his studio, lost his financial independence, and lost his throne as the most powerful director in Hollywood. In the twilight years of his life, he never again got the chance to make a movie with that level of absolute godlike control. This single film, this fragile miracle, was his most complete manifesto. The purest voice he exhausted his soul to scream out to the world. Capra traded his illustrious career just to leave behind a reminder that, no matter how desperate you are, your existence always means something to someone. Number 20. The ridiculous paperwork error and a resurrection from the dead. It seems some masterpieces have to pass through death to achieve immortality. For nearly 3 decades after its release, It's a Wonderful Life was tossed aside to gather dust in the archives like a forgettable Hollywood memory. Until 1974, when the most insane legal blunder in cinematic history occurred, automatically triggering its miraculous resurrection. Under copyright law at the time, studios had to file a renewal application after a 28-year cycle. But because this movie was considered a trashy, unprofitable flop, the studio's legal clerks neglected it and completely forgot to file the renewal paperwork. As a result, the film's copyright officially expired, and it automatically plunged into the public domain. What did this mean? It meant that suddenly, every single television station across America had the right to broadcast this movie entirely for free. Local TV networks and cable stations that were starving for holiday content but lacked the budget to license blockbusters, all swarmed to tear into this juicy piece of meat. They packed their schedules, broadcasting it day and night, playing it on an endless loop from Thanksgiving all the way to New Year's Eve just to fill airtime. And so, an entire generation of American audiences was forced to watch George Bailey's journey of despair and redemption dozens of times every year. Modern audiences assume the film is shown endlessly because it's a masterpiece, but the truth is entirely backward. It naturally took root in the subconscious and became a traditional masterpiece because it was broadcast for free until everyone knew it by heart. By the 1990s, when courts ruled to partially restore the copyright, it was far too late. The whole world had already claimed the movie as the shared property of humanity. A ridiculous paperwork error by a clerk accidentally resurrected the greatest masterpiece of all time. It's a Wonderful Life started as a shunned story on a greeting card became a box office bomb that destroyed its director's wallet, survived thanks to an idiotic copyright error, and ultimately transformed into a life raft, salvaging the souls of millions drowning in despair. If this movie ever found you at exactly the right time, if there is a scene, a quote, or the ringing of a bell that still echoes in your heart, tell us about it down in the comments. And don't forget to hit like and subscribe to join me on the journey of uncovering the truths behind history's greatest cinematic masterpieces. See you guys in the next reel.